Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to City Debates 2022. My name is Mona Harib, and I'm the coordinator of the graduate programs in urban planning, policy, and design at the American University of Beirut, and one of the co-founders and the co-directors of the Beirut Urban Lab. So 2 years after a forced hiatus, City Debates 2022 returns to the American University of Beirut campus. This, however, is not really a happy return. Multiple crises are disordering and transforming the city within which the debates were conceived and had been organized for 19 years now, in ways that are violently disruptive to our lives, to people, to homes, to livelihoods, and to places, and are quite painful to experience. How can we, as urban researchers and practitioners, still research and intervene on the city we live and value, while we and its people are undergoing drastic breakdowns, evictions, displacements, and migrations, which are modifying the city's social fabric for decades to come? Poverty rates that are affecting 80% of the population, infrastructure and services collapsing more every day, public institutions that are dysfunctional and careless, except for a few Don Quixotean champions. What is urban research and practice under such duress? What can city debates reflect on and debate under such challenging conditions? This year, we chose to favor inward-looking debates and reflect on the work we have been doing for the past 3 years at the MSFEA Beirut Urban Lab with a team of about 20 researchers and designers focusing on urban recovery in the aftermath of the port blast. More specifically, City Debates 2022 explores, through the case study of the BUL, how urban planning and design, scholarship and practice can operate in context of dysfunctional states and compounded crises. For those who don't know, the Beirut Urban Lab was established in 2018 after the four of us, Mona Fawaz, Ahmed Gharbiye, Huwaida Al-Harithi, and myself, worked together and independently for long years, beginning in 2006 with the establishment of the Reconstruction Unit at the Department of Architecture and Design. Today, the Beirut Urban Lab is a collaborative and interdisciplinary research space that produces scholarship on urbanization, documenting and analyzing ongoing transformation processes in Lebanon and beyond, and focusing on its natural and built environments. BUL intervenes both as an interlocutor and contributor to academic debates about historical and contemporary urbanization from its position in the Global South. We work towards materializing this vision into an ecosystem of change empowered by critical inquiry and engaged research, and driven by committed urban citizens and collectives aspiring to just, inclusive, and viable cities. Beirut today is undergoing what we are calling in-disaster recovery, as distinguished from post-disaster recovery, epitomizing a recurrent scenario in contemporary times, one in which decades of neoliberal governance have hollowed out public agencies, particularly in the developing countries, and left people vulnerable to large-scale climate or man-made events. In Lebanon and many other contexts of the Global South, even the illusion of representative or people-centered public governance have waned, and public agencies are widely identified as partisan bodies, representing private interest. As Mona Fawaz will elaborate tomorrow morning, the very premise of planning is shaken, since the profession has rested on the assumption of a common good embodied by a custodian, the nation-state, which is no longer. How can cities recover in such context? To what extent can relief agencies, local and international, operate in the absence of such a custodian? Can active civic groups and civil society organizations provide counterpoints? How can practitioners plan and design in the absence of public data and reliable empirical knowledge? How can urban researchers contribute to addressing this knowledge gap through data production, mapping, and visualization? Huwaida Al-Harithi, Ahmed Gharbiye, and I will address these questions and more in our contributions in panel 1 tomorrow morning, which presents BUL's intellectual framework for recovery that integrates the immediate emergency response of relief within a larger view that accounts for multiple forces exacerbating vulnerabilities and inequalities. In panels 2 and 3 tomorrow, BUL's researchers will present the modalities through which we at the lab are materializing this framework and collaboratively sketching the contours of alternative future possibilities. BUL's method rests on experimenting with deliberative modes of planning, those that inform through the creation of knowledge platforms, which are the focus of panel 2, and those that engage through planning interventions and projects, which are the focus of panel 3. We thus work with planning and design tools to forge collectivities around recognized shared interests in order to hopefully, perhaps wishfully, inform a direly needed theory of planning and practice. We do so with the generous support of our funders, which I take the opportunity to thank here for their continued support, the International Development Research Center of Canada and the Fondation de France. And we also want to thank the Ford Foundation, which is helping with the funding of City Debates 2022. We launched this evening with a keynote panel featuring Mrs. Ariella Masbounji as a speaker and Professor Robert Saliba as a discussant. Before I give them the floor and they take us to a very different landscape than what I profiled to you this evening, let me present them both and read their biographies. As many of you know here, Robert Saliba is Professor of Architecture, Urban Design and Planning at AUB. He has conducted extensive research on Beirut's historic formation and post-war reconstruction. He's the editor of Urban Design in the Arab World, Reconceptualizing Boundaries, and the author of Beirut Architecture aux sources de la modernité. He served as a land use consultant with the World Bank and UN Habitat on the state of environment in Lebanon, and previously as an urban design consultant and city planning associate in Los Angeles. Ariella Masbounji is architect and urban planner, holder of the French Grand Prix de l'Urbanisme in 2016. She was haute fonctionnaire in charge of the Projet Urbain in France and directed le Grand Prix de l'Urbanisme and the Projet Urbain workshops for the ministry in charge of sustainability. She also worked across complex settings in Europe and beyond, as you will discover tonight. She reflects on her practice in several books, including Le Plaisir de l'Urbanisme and a book that she brought with her today, and she will probably show you in her speech called La Ville Patiente, recently published. So without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Mrs. Masbounji. I invite you to come over.
Je peux avoir un micro libre.
Vous préférez un micro libre sans fil? Do we have a traveling mic, please?
Yeah, because when you are here and at the first rank, nobody sees you.
Yeah.
I couldn't see you, so I think it's better to move.
Sure.
I can.
Step? Not really, no.
Ok.
Ça peut aller comme ça?
Ça peut aller. C'est compliqué parce que
vous voulez que je bouge?
Non,
je
vais le faire. Je vais
oui?
le faire.
Donc avec,
So thank you, Mona, for the presentation, and I will just add a few words about myself. I was born in Lebanon, but I'm French educated. I'm French, and I've lived most of my life in France. But I'm very close to Lebanon, I have to say, and I've organized many debates and many studies about what's happening in Lebanon and how it's possible to be with you and to help you doing the best thing you could do in that horrible situation. My work has been very, very special because I've worked for a city in Marseille, but I invented my job in Paris, in the ministry in charge of, let's say, sustainability. about what we call urban project that I'll try to define. And for that, I traveled in many, many cities in France and also outside France, in European cities, because we have all the same problems. Also New York, because it's a Western city. It's very close to the problems we have to deal with in our European cities. And I hope that some of those lessons could help your situation, at least be in, how do you say, in sympathy with what you're doing. Before showing images, I wanted to explain why I traveled to see all those very interesting cities. It's because I'm an architect. I think most of you are architects, and we're interested into the transformation of ideas into realities, which is not the case of all urban planners. So, and also I have worked for a city named Marseille, this fantastic city, where nothing is possible to transform ideas into realities. So my focus was how those cities that deal with difficult situations, how they could do it. So I tried to understand, and I tried to share this with you. The cities that I studied are not in a special country, or are not very big or very small, but they have in common to be focused on urban transformation. And most of them were confronted to difficult situations, to catastrophic situations, but some of them not. I tried to understand why. For instance, the city of Nantes that I'm going to show you, the aim was different. The aim was to compete with successful cities in the world. So it's another reason to be focused on urban transformation. But even if we learn some lessons from them, we have to not to forget that each city has to play in its own league and make the best use of its own unique identity. It's like us. I mean, you can't, if you want to be a good speaker, you can't copy someone. You have to be the best way, the best thing that you could be with your own personality, with your own physical appearance. You can't copy. You can be inspired by method, but you can't copy what has been produced. For instance, many cities tried to create a Guggenheim to be as successful as Bilbao was, but it wasn't the good idea, because if Guggenheim has created such a dynamic transformation in Bilbao, it's not only because of the Guggenheim, it's because the city had really a real strategy, and Guggenheim was part of it. But in those cities, what I could see is that they were willing to take risks, which is not easy. And often they combined different approaches: sociology, economy, design, culture, architecture, and not only urban design. And I think that for students, it's very important to say that. And also they employ them not individually, but together, which is difficult. They assume also the decision-making responsibility to use the urban project as a leverage regeneration at all levels. And before explaining the lessons, I wanted to define, maybe if it could be longer. No, it's not possible. Yes, we haven't repeated, you know. So, non, mais c'est bon comme ça. Je peux utiliser l'autre? Thank you. I was afraid to speak in English, but they told me that Lebanese, they love French accent when we speak English. And I have a French accent, I have to say. Once I tried, really, I was a note speaker, keynote speaker in Liverpool. And really, I trained myself to have a good British accent. So I gave my lecture, and afterwards, the leader of the conference told me, lovely French accent. So it's desperate. It's not possible. You have to accept it. So before showing the lessons, I wanted to define what we call urban project, because the term doesn't exist in English, really. You say urban planning and you say urban design. It's not exactly the same thing. So urban project, in my French definition, is advances an ambitious urban vision by combining social, economical, urban development strategy with a strong design, urban design. It goes together. And an urban project is not simply an intention. It only begins to exist when projected images become realizations. We've seen very many cities announcing urban projects and doing nothing. I paid myself to understand this lesson because I worked in Marseille, which was it was impossible to realize anything. And also the urban project is a vision for the entire territory. It's not only a limited surface project. And also what I want to say is that I make a difference between the urban project with capital letters. That is really a vision that what city do you want to be? What do you want Beirut to be? Is it possible to say it? Not very many leaders are able to express this vision. And also we can speak of urban project with not capital, but minuscule. What's minuscule? Not capital. And that are the different actions that you realize to be in relationship with your urban vision. Another definition is the link between men, between people, between spaces, and between activities, between functions. For instance, a very, very beautiful development, for instance, in a gated community, can't be an urban project because there's no link. And I think that this is a very simple definition, and maybe you can use it. Now I'm going to show images, if I can. My first lesson is this. I try to. It's very recent. Is it the end of what we called the great projects? Maybe it is. It's what we are observing in France. But how did those great projects existed? I try to explain. First of all, the motivating effect of the danger, cities that have their backs to the wall, which is the case of Beirut. And the second reason is the desire to surpass an existing situation, to rise to the level of competing the other countries. Some examples. The first one that I like very much is Genoa. Genoa is a port in Italy, in the north of Italy, and it was what we called the Ville Monde, the world cities, one of the cities that dominated the world. Very beautiful city. But this city was losing its situation, was losing population. The port was in difficulty, and they had the chance to have Renzo Piano, to have a wonderful mayor, to have a fantastic director of the port, and also a fantastic director of the how do you say, the public developer, And then what did they do? First of all, it was an idea of Renzo Piano, who is born in Genoa, is to transform the old port and to make it, well, a walkable city, a place of activity, of economy, but also of leisure. Because Genoa had no public spaces. So they created a fantastic public space along the port. And I can't explain everything, but Renzo Piano designed this aquarium who attracted about 1 million people every year. For the economy, it was very good. And also, they used the great events to progress in the transformation of the city. Of course, there was the event about Christophe Colomb, then the G8, and in 2004, Capital of Culture. Every time they used this tool to progress, to make new projects, and to transform the city. Then Genoa was one example of the catastrophic situation. Nantes, in the west of France, is the other situation. Is how can you exist in the map, the global map in the world of the cities that are interesting, where developers will come, where the financial investment will come. And the former mayor, who has been our prime minister, Jean-Marc Ayrault, I asked him, why are you doing all that? He said, I'm in the west of France, so I'm very far from every economical dynamic. So I have to progress. I have to make the city more itself than ever. So they did very, very many things. And mostly this very fantastic project, L'Île de Nantes, it's like an island, very close to the city center, a former industrial place, industrial land, who has been transformed by a famous French landscape architect and urban planner, Alexandre Chemetov, who is really someone very innovative, because his idea was that you don't have to destroy anything. You can enhance any heritage. And it was very new. It was in 2000. For instance, those factories, I visited the island with him, and I told him, what will you do with those factories? He said, I have no idea, but we are going to like désosser, to take all the facades, and then someone will come and say, I want to go there. That's what happened with Royal de Luxe, the artist Royal de Luxe, who created here a fantastic cultural place, building animals that can walk all over the city. And it's so attractive now, it's a spot. But also in the whole Île de Nantes, they reuse the land, they created, this is an artwork, fantastic, along the river Loire. So I can't explain everything, but this city now is known all over the world for cultural activities, for attracting investors, for attracting creative people. Then this was very important, I mean, for changing the city. But is it the end of the Grand Projet? Not sure, but maybe, because the idea of Grand Projet, great project, is changing. We don't have enough public money, and at least we could say maybe things are changing, and maybe I'm going to show it to you during the presentation. Well, this is an example of the public spaces created along the River Loire in a former derelict land. And you could see how attractive it is and how it's mixing all people, all ages, all population, rich people, not rich people. My second point is urban redevelopment as a lever for economic and social regeneration. And I like very much how British are able to say important things with a few words, that good design leads to good economy. That's what I heard when I worked in Birmingham. Well, I used to organize workshops in many European cities, attracting mostly French people, and afterwards we wrote a book, and it was so interesting to work with British people, because we don't have the same state of mind, And I think we learn from them and they learn from us. And also, I quote Richard Florida, that I'm sure you know, because Richard Florida wrote so many books about creative people, creative cities, and he explained that attractive creative activities is a key to success for the cities. Then the example is, of course, for me, Birmingham, because I choose Birmingham. I wanted to organize a workshop in UK, and they proposed to me Liverpool, Manchester, that I liked very much. But I say I want to go to Birmingham because it's the ugliest city in the Western world. And it's important to see how being so ugly doesn't mean not being able to make an urban project and to change the city and to make it attractive. It's the second city in Great Britain, and I don't know if you read literature, but many writers like Jonathan Coe, David Lodge, they speak of Birmingham. Sometimes they don't quote Birmingham, but it's Birmingham. And for them, it's the ugliest city possible. I mean, the city where you don't have to go. And this city has been almost destroyed by the war and also destroyed by urban planner because they designed a horrible, horrible project, cutting the center from its center 400 meters from the surroundings by a road that is impossible to cross. So they don't have any les feux de circulation, red lights, and then you have to go downstairs with bridges. It was horrible. So the idea was what you see here. It's like a finger, a hand, to create inhabited bridges with new developments. And then maybe the second image is come first. The first bridge was this one. And they created this new development with private developers. And this private developer is as good, maybe better, than public developer. It's Argent. Argent is, how do you say, a very committed developer. And they wanted to focus on quality. I can't explain everything, it's impossible. I don't have time enough. After doing this, they discovered this building that was a building for telephone that the city was going to put mettre aux enchères. Auction. And then one of the developers here who worked here went to see the director of urban planning and told him, I'm very interested with this building. I want to make it, you know, the new Champs-Élysées, a place very, very chic with nice shopping, but also with radio, with hotel, with many things. And the director of urbanism told him, okay. And he could have the money from the bank. The whole story in France would be completely impossible. Completely impossible. So the guy created this project that is fantastic. And afterwards, another developer designed this. This is one of the first shopping centers open to the sky and integrating heritage. And also they built very nice buildings. This was one of the bridge above the highway. This city had a real vision. Its vision is to become a city of business tourism. They couldn't be a city of tourism. That's all, because it's a very ugly city. And I forgot to say that they were in a terrible situation because the city was successful because of the cars, and the company was closed. So they have to invent a new economy. That's why I often say that economy is the real reason to build an urban project. This example is so interesting because it's such different but the same idea. It's on the north of France, not very far from the city of Lille. what we call le bassin minier, which means the mining area in France that goes from France to Belgium and also to Germany. Now, their situation was terrible because the economy was dead of the coal, and they have to reinvent themselves. Well, the government, the French government, offered this wonderful museum that is Le Louvre, Lens, designed by fantastic Japanese architect. And so it's a spot, and it attracts not far from 1 million people a year, which is not nothing. But the project goes beyond the museum because it's so large. I mean, it's 100 kilometers project. By renewing, I forgot the name of in English, of the coal, not mountains, but what's the name? Voilà. Les terrils. Quelqu'un peut me dire? Les terrils. The mountains of coal. They were objects of project with green, with activities, and also creating new centralities. And you can see here how the urban project at a very large scale is a leverage for renewing economy. And this brings me to that very important subject, I think, for the future, the new scale of the urban project on very large territories. And I have to quote one of the prominent urban planner of the 20s, maybe beginning of 21. It's Bernardo Secchi, Italian. And he puts it like that. We need a working framework for a city inevitably dispersed, fragmented, and diversified. And this is our great problem. And even in Lebanon, I mean, you have that situation that we have in France. So if you want to be sustainable, if you want to be coherent, if you want to create social cohesion, you need to think at a very large scale. And in France, were created new governments at a very large level, like Grand Paris, Great Paris, Great Lyon, and as you can see, Aix-Marseille-Provence is still larger. Maybe it's larger than Lebanon, I don't know. How many square kilometers Lebanon? Comment? Ah, d'accord. The third of Lebanon, Aix-Marseille-Provence. And those new governments, well, the Grand Paris never worked well. The other one, this one works very well. This one, not so much. But in, for instance, around Nantes, Bordeaux, it's really interesting to have those new governments because they can think at a larger scale, and especially that sustainability, water, energy, you can't solve it in a small scale, which is really, really impossible. And then I'll try to show some example. For us, for European urban planner, the major example is Emscher Park in Germany. And it has never been copied, and you don't have any example of that quality and that level. I visited many times, and I organized a workshop with the leaders of this development in France, and it's astonishing. This is also a coal mine region, and also a region where the mines were closing. But they had also, it's an industrial part of Germany, on northwest of Germany, but they had also des aciéries, steel factories. Steel factories were okay, but steel factories, at first they had a lot of people working in the factories, and at the end maybe 1 or 2 people with machines. So the unemployments were terrible. And they decided, the government, to create what they call a NIBA, NIBA, I can't say it in German, it's very complicated, but it means International Exhibition of Architecture. Actually, it's not architecture only, it's urban planning, it's whatever you want. So they had a real project for this whole territory that is almost 100 kilometers long and 35 kilometers wide. It's along the river Escher. That was, how do you say, it was very dirty. They transformed all that territory by enhancing the industrial heritage. For French people, it was fantastic lessons because usually in France, this heritage was destroyed or was too much transformed, you know, too clean, it wasn't the same. Germans were able to preserve the heritage by adding modern expressions in architecture, but leaving the identity of this heritage. What you can see here at the end is a park integrating this industrial heritage. But I can't explain everything, but what was fascinating and what I learned is that at that time, that was at the 1990, they were able to define sustainability. We weren't able to define. And they said, sustainability is not using land that hasn't been used. First lesson. Second, you have to transform the heritage. Third, social aims are as important as urban quality, architectural quality. For instance, and maybe fourth lesson, I can't explain everything, but fourth lesson is that an urban project is not only building. For instance, creating a cafe in a poor development led by Turkish women is a project because it creates social cohesion, activity, and so on. So for us, it remains the lesson. And also, what I liked very much is the use of land art. For instance, all the thing that I can't name, maybe I will find the terrils, but you don't know what it is because you don't have it in Lebanon. Those mountains of coals, they were dominated by artwork. Coal heaps, that's it. And then you could see them around the river. So when you were along the river or along the highway, the new monuments were those fantastic artwork on those heaps. Ça, mine heaps. J'avais trouvé comme un coal heaps. What is interesting is that in that method, IBA, they had the city to transform the ideas into reality, and also what is really interesting is that they called for initiatives. And I will go back to that idea. At this very large scale, larger than Hampshire Park, is the estuary of Nantes, Saint-Nazaire. So this is Saint-Nazaire and this is Nantes that we saw a few minutes ago. And they have a real project to working together. Transforming the river Loire was in danger. They had to save it. And also creating an economical, social dynamic between the two cities and along the river. Also, they use art. And they have a biennale of contemporary art. At that time it was every 2 years, now it's every 3 years. And what you can see on the top is the heritage, the industrial heritage. And here, some of the artwork along the river. It's fantastic because it has created the feeling of belonging to the same territory. I can't explain all the actions that have been driven and are still driven, but it creates these kind of things, you know, enhancing the relationship with the river creating, gathering people to be together, all people. My fourth point, I hope I'm not too long, I'll try to go quicker, faster. Sustainability and sobriety as a way of life. I think this is so important as a way of life. We have to change our way of life. And also as planning and urban design philosophy. I use the term philosophy because it's more important than the regulation, than everything that is normative. It's the way you think. I spoke about the vision, the philosophy of the action. What I showed about MSFEA is a philosophy. The way they saw their future. It's not only technical. Very often we are not able to explain to the public what urbanism is because we use technical words that nobody understands. But if you speak of vision, what city I want to be, everybody can understand, and how we can live it, how it can be nice. This is the way you have to speak with the people, the decision makers. You have to make them want your project, not only for technical reason. Especially not for technical reason. And also I'm going to speak about energy. I wrote 2 books about energy. My contact with a city as a way of thinking sustainability was a small city in Netherlands, Breda. Breda is in the west of, southwest of Netherlands. And they have a system that I like so much. It's not the state, nation, who gives prices, but it's civil society. So there is an association that every year makes inquiries and decides what is the most sustainable city in the country. In France, it's the state who gives this prize. So Breda was the most sustainable city in Netherlands. It's a city who has about 300,000 people, but with its region, it makes 600,000 people. And the transformation was really radical. The transformation of the city center, being totally pedestrian, the church is transformed into cultural and artistical activities. And this is a new development, very, very close to the city center, to create a way of life. How can you live and very close to the city? It's designed by Oma. When you see the images, maybe you don't like it, but when you are there, it's fantastic. Also, they reused this in the city center that was a monastery, and now it's a casino. It's a casino, but you know, in Netherlands, they don't have this kind of problems. And because the casino pays for the cultural center that is here, also rock activities, and they created new canals into the city. So it's impossible to explain everything, as I said before, but it's how do you it's a state of mind, it's a way of life. For instance, in their project, it's important to create places of silence. This is a project, places for silence, everywhere, because they think that in the city you need places to be very calm, not to see too many people, and they have this tradition of béguinage. The way they deal with the floods, because you know that Netherlands is under the level of the sea. That's why also they're very focused on sustainability, because if they're not sustainable, they die. They die. The water will come. So, and you know that they speak to other Europeans and they say, please do it better because we will die. We are under the sea. So what did they do here? They create a derivation of the river, which is so clever, because when the water goes up, it can go into derivation. They have very good ideas, very simple to deal with those problems of flood. I don't know, I think in Lebanon you should have, I think you have this problem. About energy. Energy, I don't know why, I was focused on this, it's so very interesting. I published 2 books. One, the name is Energy in the Heart of the Urban Project, and the second is 200 Initiatives. Why initiatives? Because more and more, you know, I'm very old, but I try to be open-minded. So I learned that initiatives are more interesting than what we, urban planner, are able to propose. And this book begins with, usually in France, you would say what the state is doing. So all the book is organized like that. What the state can do, what can do the regions, what can do the cities, what can do developers, what can do architects, and what can do people. But we started by people, which is very unusual in France, because France is very, you know, the state decides, but it's changing. It's changing. The responsible of Fondation de France is okay with me? It's changing. So we tried to focus on the way energy can be in the heart of urban project. I discovered this project in Madrid. Madrid is very, very hot. I mean, in winter it's very cold, and in summer it's very, very hot. And then young architects, in a new development, they created what they call a technology tree, not one tree, and it provides photovoltaic energy, and vertical planting produces evaporative cooling, as you can see, and also they produce energy, they sold it, and they use it for maintenance, for artistic events, and so on. That's what you can do. I mean, even at a very, very small scale. At a large scale, it's very interesting. This is an image produced by Franck Boutet. Franck Boutet is in France the best specialist he's also an architect, to integrate energy problems in our city. And he says you don't have to think every building by itself, but together with the other. And you have to mutualize energy. For instance, in the new developments, I could see that in Bordeaux, in the new development, we create energy with the biomass, and they serve a very large social housing that is close. So you have to think as a system, not building by building. And most important idea is to say that even if when you build one building, you make it very, very sustainable, if it produces energy, okay, it's good. But it's not so much important in terms of energy consumption and in CO2 emissions, carbon emissions. Because what is more important, and I could feel it here because it's very cold in the houses, and yesterday, well, I won't explain all my life, but I was very cold at night, and the temperature is not so low because the houses are not protected. It's horrible. So you have to even in Lebanon, where you build very much, the existing city is much more important than what you are building now. So the most important in terms of energy and carbon emission is to protect, to act on the existing fabric. That is, in France, 99% of the country, of the built country. I go back to a few images about energy that I liked very much because even if they are utopian, they give ideas. 10 years ago, President Sarkozy launched a competition to design the Paris at a large scale. And it was really successful. And I have to say that 2 days ago, I met the Richard Rogers team at the MIPIM, And I told them, you know, this was a good idea, because they proposed, there were 10 teams working, but no winner, just producing ideas. And their idea is to create, at those key points, urban batteries producing renewable energy, whatever situation you could meet, because not all renewable energies are adapted in any case. Sometimes it's solar, sometimes it's biomass, sometimes it's eolian, it's wind. But, and those batteries, they serve the new centrality and polarity with high density. So this idea is very contemporary. And you know, with what's happening in Ukraine, the issue is maybe the main issue today for urban planners, energy, how you deal with energy. I'll go back to that. But another team, a French team, proposed to reinforce the forests surrounding Paris in order to lower temperature, and it's very efficient, but also to produce energy. Many ideas like that has been proposed in the Grand Paris competition. And about energy, Rem Koolhaas gathered a team to imagine how whole Europe can be sustainable and can be autosufficient, using whatever new energy possible. And all the regions are going to create a network. You see, a network connected, because the renewable energy, they don't work all the time. So when the solar works, it can serve other country, and so on. So, of course, it's utopian, but we need utopia, because sometimes they are responding to the problems that we have. You know now that Europe is trying to serve Ukraine. And about energy, I will say another word, because my new subject I'm working on now is what I call territoires oubliés, forgotten territories that are very far from the cities, where people don't have doctors, where they don't have facilities. And I think it's one of the main problems in France, and not only in France. But those territories are able today to produce energy and also to create the necessary lands for biodiversity that we'll have to create. If we don't do that, we're going to die. So we are a few urban planners trying to explain that we need in France an overall plan for all France to define where, even if our president will be, if he's re-elected, he wants to create a new nuclear energy. But we need lands. It's impossible to deal only with small lands. It's impossible. Today, the renewable energies are focused on the former industrial land, and we don't have any more. And also on the buildings, it's not enough. We need land. So those large territories that we have in France will be able to attract those energies and biodiversity, and we'll have to pay for that. And also, it's possible to deal with agriculture. There are some experiments that show that agricultural places could host new energies, but this is for the future. Just to tell you that you have to be interested in those subjects. The fifth subject is about city design by mobility and public spaces. And I think you know that mobility is becoming more and more different from transportation, in the same way that your iPhone is no more used as a telephone. It's different. Mobility is different from transportation. And we have to integrate this new way of thinking mobility in our plan and at any level. And we have to imagine how we can use less cars in order to create more sustainable metropolitan area and more enjoyable way of life. We could also design cities for pedestrians. What I show here is a design made by the Richard Rogers team for Paris on the competition that I told you about. And they say, okay, cars, but differently. You can have electric cars and you have sidewalks, very important sidewalks, and cities transformed. You don't live in the same way. On my point of view, what is important is to design the public space for pedestrians, even if you have cars. Nowadays, every road, every public space is designed for the cars, even in the suburbs. Sometimes in suburban developments where no cars, you have the car in the morning and at night. And it's designed for the cars, which is horrible. I mean, we need to change completely our way of designing the city. We can host the cars, but they're welcome, but they don't have the priority. This example is in Copenhagen. Of course, speaking of public spaces, you can't not speak of Barcelona. Barcelona for us, I was very young when they did this. It's like the Mecca for urban planner. Barcelona, I often like to compare with Beirut because their situation were horrible. They've had a terrible government. They were in very bad situation, and they reinvented themselves with public spaces. They say we don't have money. We'll try to have the Olympian Games, but meanwhile, we'll transform the public spaces. And the best architects, the best artists, and very, very good team inside the city, the leader of it was Oriol Bohigas, one of the most prominent architects and urban planner of the 20s. He was the boss. So they transformed the city center, and if you go now, you can find it as nice as 30 years ago. And sustainability for me is that also. I mean, when you don't feel like you have to change everything. I speak in French of esthétique intemporelle. I mean that you can't date. You can't say this has been done last year, 10 years ago, 30 years ago. You have no idea. If you look at, for instance, in architecture, the production of Renzo Piano, you can't date. It's impossible because it's so sustainable. I mean, the aesthetic is, nobody speaks of sustainable aesthetic. But they don't transform only the city center, but also the roads. This is the peripheral road here. And here, it was terrible before. It was like a highway, the Via Giulia. Everybody in the world went to visit Via Giulia to see how they could deal with those roads and the metro and to make it livable. But what is fantastic in Barcelona, that they still do the same thing 40 years afterwards. No, maybe 30 years. And this example, I like it very much because it shows also how the city can change in the time. Here, the building that you see there, it's very beautiful, and it covers a marché aux puces. Marché aux puces. What's a marché aux puces? Free market? Flea market. Flea market. So in Barcelona, they have an architect in chief of the city, and his job is to see what is changing and what could be done. So he liked very much this place, and he said, if I do nothing, it will go. So he launched a concourse, a competition, And this project won, and now it's so beautiful. Everybody comes and say, one of the most beautiful building in Barcelona. And how you can see the very, very large public spaces with, this is free. I mean, you can come and have a coffee and stay at the sun, and it's free. The public spaces in France, the best experience is the city of Lyon. They have done a wonderful job, especially along the river. This is a river very hard, the Rhône. And now they're doing the same thing with the Saône. That is a very nice river. So it has been transformed into a very lively public space with attracting so many people, linking. It's all along the city. But also, the same idea in Lyon than in Barcelona is that you have to do the best thing you can do on every part of the city. In the center, in the suburbs, outside the suburbs, in the poor developments, in the rich developments, everywhere. This is the main idea. I wanted to show also how the tramway, but not only the tramway, the busway has been an opportunity to create public spaces. This is Ile de Nantes. It's an opportunity to create green spaces and public spaces. It's happening everywhere in France now. Not for the busways. Very often the busways are horrible because you have a lot of concrete and no trees. But usually the tramway everywhere is good. Now we have to think the busway in the same way as the tramway. And I wanted to show this example in New York City that I studied also, wrote a book with Jean-Louis Cohen during the period where the mayor was Bloomberg, fantastic mayor. So they tried to, they renewed the public spaces. I won't explain everything. They created so many streets for the bikes, so many actions. But I think this can be very interesting for Beirut. They tried to limitate the road, the place for the cars. Very often the place for the car is very large and not useful. So what wasn't really necessary for the car has been transformed into public space with free chairs, and you can stay. It doesn't cost a lot, and the city becomes like, you know, like living rooms. Okay, I won't, of course, I will go further. And when you speak of public spaces, you have to speak of the street ground level as an integrated urban space project. Of course, shopping, but the shopping in France, in the cities, are 10% of the length of the roads. So if you want to have a street, a livable street space, you don't have to think only about shopping, but also about how when you build a building, how the first level can be transparent, how, for instance, university could have restaurants on the street level, visible, also the offices. It's a state of mind, and it could be really like a street project. For instance, here it's a development in Paris, very important, around the Bibliothèque de France, Paris Rive Gauche. It was important to have a double level on the regulations, double level, open, and to attract facilities, but also shopping. And the developer bought all the first levels, the ground level and first level. And then afterwards, he went to try to find the facilities or the investors. And it's possible in Paris, because Paris is a rich city. It's not possible everywhere. Because one of the reasons of the non-successful first levels, in the street levels, in the new developments, is that the shopping doesn't come when people are not here. Shopping doesn't come when there are works. So it's very difficult, and the developer could do that. Now it's a practice more important. Il faut aller plus vite. Hein? Ah oui, je vais aller plus vite. Now I will just quote incentive. No, it's not incentive. Welcome initiatives. Welcome initiatives, it's very important subject for me. I have three things to say about the participative budget, welcome initiatives, and auto-promotion. This is welcome initiatives in Bordeaux. It's a developer who came and say, I want to reuse this building and I want to make it a place of life. I think this is important because all the ideas doesn't come from the public sector, and you have to attract them and to make it possible. I go further. Using also the tactical urbanism, one of the most interesting examples is in Netherlands, Amsterdam. They had a very terrible crisis in 2008, like everyone. So they offered 10 years of renting for people who had ideas. And this idea was really interesting because this was a very polluted land. So the team of architects, they bought boats that weren't used. They put it on the land and they treated the land with plants to destroy the pollution. And meanwhile, they created a cafe and places for working, and now it's very successful. The Quevel is continuing. I go further. I wanted to say a word about Baugruppen, what they call Baugruppen. It's, I didn't find a translation in English. Auto-promotion maybe. In Berlin, it's very successful in Berlin, but now in France also. So you have mainly architects. They buy a land and they discuss with the city and they say, we are going to build without any developer, and we'll try to make it sustainable, to create facilities, to create places for children, energy. So Berlin is covered with this kind of thing. And what is really interesting is it changes the urban fabric and the architectural fabric. One word about to combine and articulate urban planning and urban project, because usually the people who make urban planning, they hate people who make urban projects. In France, it's the two categories that hate each other. And each one thinks that is more important to make planning or to make projects. And it was difficult to translate into English. What I want to say is that for me, planning is more a vision than regulation. The example of New York is so interesting because during the Bloomberg period, they created this idea of Plan YC, greener, greater in New York, focused on many issues, like we can see, and creating ideas about energy, about water supply, and those ideas were transformed into planification, and they had 25 agencies to realize those actions corresponding to those ideas. I think that if you are interested in planning, you can find it in internet or in my book, but it's in French. So I will try to finish very quickly. Important to manage public-public partnership to attract the private sector. This is an example in Liverpool. Liverpool was a terrible city. The situation was maybe worse than Birmingham's. But they attracted a retail investor who renewed the city center in connection to the existing city. But I mean, they were in, they had the same way of thinking the city. And this was so good, but it's possible when the public sector agrees. Very often, our projects in France can't work because the different public agency can't go to an agreement. So in that case, the private sector doesn't come because it will lose money. So that was my point. A very important point is decision making, even at the very risk of being wrong. All the cities that I studied are driven by leaders that are not afraid. They make decisions. And I want to say to the student, it's very difficult to convince a leader because he's taking the risk. You're not taking the risk. He's taking the risk. And it's always a risk. Even if you're sure, for instance, you're sure that if you make public spaces, you know that the private sector will come and spend money. But maybe in that particular situation, it won't work. So you need leaders that are not afraid. And I mean, all the cities that I studied that has been very proactive in terms of urban planning have had leaders not afraid, taking the risk. And even the risk not to be re-elected. If you want to be re-elected, sometimes you can't do it. Lisboa was a fantastic example because the leader that is now the prime minister was the mayor of Lisbon, and he took the risk to take off the cars in a city of cars. And he was very well re-elected, but it was a terrible risk. So, one of the major issues that we are not sure to be able to deal with is how to link urban and social projects, because very often when you create a new development, the poor people have to go. And how you deal with that? I don't have the answer, but I show you here a map of Paris that is incredible. In black, the rich people, in red, the poor people. You could see how the city is separated and what is to be done not to have this situation that you can find almost in any city. This example of dealing with social issues is very important because Germany hosted refugees coming from Syria here in the former airport of Tempelhof. So I think this is up-to-date example. And in Lisboa, the mayor changed the place of his city hall and went here in one very poor development, very poor old center of the city, and decided to renew it during his 5 years of being mayor. And he succeeded. But also another message important is to value the differences, because here you have 70 nationalities or ethnical or differences. And in Lisboa, it's a real lesson. And no, this I won't explain. This is my book. Is how you make the city less boring, less generic. But Mona, one of the Monas, told me that I have no time, so I will leave you the book and the ideas, like a permissive city, a key-treatable city, producing living ground floor that I spoke of. I speak about health, because health now is a new subject, really important in urban planner, productive city, and also a city that changes all the time. But I have no time. And this maybe I won't explain, but I leave it to you. What are the qualities you have to develop to be a good urban planner and a good designer? I will just want to say the first thing is you have to be very optimistic. Because if you're not optimistic, you have to change your job. Absolutely. Because it's a very difficult job. You have to convince very many people. And also you have to know that most of your design, you will throw them. You will show them and throw them because they won't be realized. So if you're not optimistic, if you're not convinced, if you don't know how to defend your project, you really need to change jobs. It's possible, it's still possible now. But at the end, because I will leave the PowerPoint, at the end, it's a wonderful job. It's a wonderful job. And you will have a lot of pleasure. Why? Because if you are an architect, it's terrible because the architect builds. He can see his work and he say, I did it. The urban planner never can say that because very seldom he realizes what he designed. And even if it's realized, he can't sign. He can't sign. But it's fantastic because you have an influence for the city, and it's really a very beautiful job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I invite Professor Saliba to give comments. Would you like to sit there, perhaps?
Well, you know, I'm completely delighted. I'm just floating. I feel myself floating after this presentation. And, you know, it's like we were in another world for 45 minutes. Okay, so I would like to thank you for this refreshing tour d'horizon in the la-la land of planning and design practices in European and American cities where states are functional, where urbanism is operational, where master plans have been transcended by action plans, and where urbanists have morphed from bureaucrats into entrepreneurs, cultivating the art of negotiation. And here I'm referring to the last two slides that you did not explain. Cultivating the art of negotiation, tenacious, always ready to get to a yes, and above all, recognized and bestowed with prestigious awards by the state itself. Okay, which is really a sign that urbanists are really appreciated by the states. For you, it seems to be that it's normal, you know, but for us, it's a big deal, you know. So thank you for also the last two slides that you did not explain that I loved, okay? But thank you for this invitation to embrace the idea of la ville passionante, okay? Okay. I enjoyed immensely finding alternative terms to passionante. Non-accurate, of course, but who cares, you know? So I find such words as la ville décomplexée, la ville séduction, the playful city. In brief, the ad hoc transitory city at ease in its incompleteness and permissiveness. It's the city that's serious about not being serious. Okay, I hope that, you know, I captured what you had in mind. So, what a departure from the uptight and moralizing jargon of professionals. So, thank you. I would like to highlight two thoughts, okay, inspired by your presentation today, and also, and surtout, inspired by a highly interesting talk on YouTube titled Femmes et paysages en Méditerranée, Ariella Masbonji, Le plaisir de l'urbanisme. Okay. I frankly recommend this talk to all. The talk captured, I may say, le personnage behind the professional and added to the comprehension of a remarkable professional itinerary. So I strongly advise, you know, people to watch this, you know, this recording.
It's in French. They don't understand French.
So I translated part of it at the end of my notes, okay? So my first thought is about the complete paradigmatic reversal of the French and European urban discourse, from the dogmatism of plans to the pragmatism of the projet urbain. We never dared in the 1960s and 70s to think in those terms, because this is when I got my education. I would like to advance a daring generalization. Has French and European urbanism been Americanized? And here, I'm referring to two tracks in urban design theory and practice that differentiates between two tracks of thinking, the rationalist European track and the empiricist pragmatic Anglo-Saxon track. So, Ariella Masbungi, you were a key agent in this paradigmatic reversal. I wish you could comment this, about this intriguing experience, but of course this will be the subject of another, panel. Okay, but really it's very interesting. I was personally very interested to see, to hear about this itinerary. Now, this paradigmatic reversal did not happen in the professional field only, but also in the academic field. You reflected in your YouTube talk, again, I'm referring to it, on the interface between recherche et action. I don't know if you remember, okay, and research and action. And you qualified the American approach as la recherche pour le projet, par le projet, project-based, la recherche par le projet.
Research by design.
Research by design, I translated as project-based research. Okay, so would you consider what's being done today at the Urban Lab at AUB as a research through, project-based research? And that's a question that's really interesting. And I will elaborate on this later on, but of course it will be something to be answered at the end of this, city debates. My second thought, inspired by your keynote on European planning, is l'urbanisme par l'exemple, learning from, and in my opinion, it does not work, okay? And it never works. It may work between Europe and the US, and we saw it today. There was a lot of exchange of ideas between Europe and the US. Your example covered both cities in Europe and the US. It never worked between North and South, since the basic conditions of its success are missing, a functioning state. And when imported from north to south, urbanism is twisted, bastardized, and emptied from its implementability. Ask Mona Fawaz about that. So this has proved to be the case in Lebanon, from colonial urbanism, Danger, to modernist urbanism, Kochar, and recently we even had our projet urbain. I dare qualify Solidaire as a projet urbain. I dare do it. I will be interested to know if you will qualify Solidaire as a projet urbain. Why yes, why no? Okay, now I will uncover my intention, my secret agenda behind this introduction. Bringing you back from La La Land to Limbo Land, Beirut. From La La Land, Europe, to Limbo Land, Beirut. Bringing you back to Beirut. I don't know if it, apparently it happened before, but I do not know it. How to operate in the context of a dysfunctional state. How to operate in the context of a dysfunctional state, and also and mainly of a dysfunctional citizenship. And this is what we always miss, because since we fully deserve what we are getting. And here I would like to open a parenthesis again about City Debates 2022, which may be considered as an attempt to transcend l'urbanisme par l'exemple. imported urbanism, and to articulate our own response to crisis urbanism, a sort of a grassroots urbanism inspired but not replicating global trends. And here it's, you know, it's an issue that we would like really to discuss with you. But again, maybe at the end of the city debates. With your hybrid background and extensive experience, you are a key person to comment on this effort, actually. I would like to end up by bringing you back to Beirut via your Marseille experience. I'll be using your own propos in French to reach the personnage behind the urbanist. Then I will translate in in English. No need to say that while listening to your words, I was thinking about Beirut all the time. So here I'm quoting you. J'ai essayé de mettre, it's about your Marseille experience. These are your words, okay? J'ai essayé de mettre un peu d'ordre dans cette ville désordonnée. C'est pas facile. Puis j'ai essayé en tant qu'urbaniste d'apporter une certaine rigueur des continuités des espaces publics, et je n'y arrivais pas. Alors, j'ai écrit un texte, une sorte de texte poétique, que j'ai appelé « Marseille, le désordre magnifique ». J'ai tiré la leçon que vous ne pouvez pas mettre Marseille en ordre, qu'on pouvait aller dans le sens de son histoire, de sa géographie, pour lui apporter un peu de douceur, c'est beau, hein? Un peu de douceur des continuités urbaines, mais en jouant sur cette violence des contrastes qui fait partie de l'identité de Marseille. C'est beau. Et pour moi, c'était une grande révélation et une mutation, et ça m'a amené d'ailleurs depuis, à chaque fois que j'ai travaillé sur d'autres villes, à me dire comment chaque ville peut être la plus identitaire possible, la plus elle-même. And so welcome to Beirut. So what I would like to do now, I would like to just, repeat this text in English. And before asking you to narrate your Beirut to us briefly. I tried to put some order in this messy town, Marseille. It's not easy. Then I tried as an urban planner to bring a certain rigor to the continuities of public spaces, and I could not do it. I wrote a text, a sort of a poetic text, which I called Marseille the Magnificent Mess. Sorry for the word. I learned the lesson. You can't put Marseille in order. We could go in the direction of its history, its geography, to bring a certain sweetness to its public spaces, while playing on this violence of contrast, which is part of the identity of Marseille. And for me, it was a great revelation, a mutation. This made me think that each time I'm working on other cities, I have to tell myself how each city can have the most identity possible by being itself. So, thank you so much for these remarkable words. And I would like to, just to invite you, if you have any remarks, on what has been said, then open the floor to the audience.
Am I supposed to answer?
Yes.
No, but, because very, very many ideas, and I'm really fascinated by the time you took to prepare this. And
I was fascinated myself.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, I forgot this because I've had an interview as a Mediterranean woman and urban planning, and it was very nice. It was a nice experience, I have to say.
It's a very nice
yeah. I like very much Beirut. I've lived here, and my first house was in front of the Saint-Georges. So it was fantastic because I could see all international people coming here, and you know, all that leisure place, fantastic. Then afterwards I was in Rue Verdun, that is nice also. And now I have to live in Ashrafia that I hate, I find it horrible. Where you live, but now I think it's improving. But anyway, I like Beirut because Beirut is a city of contrast, like Marseille, I have to say. And it's a very surprising city. When I first began this work, the Ville Patiente, that many people told me, how can you call a book like that? It's impossible because it's a very vulgar expression. I said, but I have to call it like that because that's what I think. My husband told me, but you know, you take examples here in Beirut because it's not boring. That's really, because it's a city of contrast. So what can we do for Beirut? Of course, I'm not sure that I agree with you that all experiences are not useful for the South. I don't think so. Because, for instance, you know, British people are not so top-down, huh? And German, they're very much bottom-up. And we have lessons to learn from each other, even from, it depends, what do you call South? For instance, Lisboa is South.
No, I differentiate between Europe and actually.
For instance, one of the main problems here in Lebanon is that you can build everywhere. This is impossible. This you can't deal with. And Jad Tabet tried to find solution to make, how do you say, transfer of rights. Yeah. For instance, Lisboa did that so well. And I made a proposal because the former deputy mayor of Lisboa is a great friend of mine and a great architect. He studied this and he implemented in Lisboa. Why? Because they didn't have the money to buy the land. So they have to make those transfer. And he's the king of the transfer. And he's happy to help you if you want to work with him, because he knows exactly how to do it.
We did it already.
I know you did it, but he's the master. So you can.
Non, je suis pas parti. أنا أتحكم فيه.
What happened also in Lisboa is that when they make the decision to lower the quantity of cars in the city, all the people were against it. It's always like that. And I say to the students, every time you're going to make a proposal, everybody will say, no, we don't want it. It's too complicated to change everything. It costs and so on. And you have to convince them. And how to convince them? By trying to show what it creates. I mean, in Lebanon, if you can manage with a local leader to make a nice, walkable city on a small place, a nice thing, then everybody will see that it's nice, and people will speak about that. And afterwards, because Lebanese, they copy each other every time. So it can create a movement. And I believe very much in urbanism by example. I could see it in France, and it was my work in the Directory of Urban Planning, because they were writing the laws. And my job was to go and see what the city were doing, and what were the ideas of the urban planners. And I got back to the ministry to say, you know, this city has done this, and this city. Then they changed the law, because they could see how it was possible. L'île de Nantes, the island of Nantes. Alexandre Chemetov was paid, well, before 2000, the urban planner were paid nothing to design a project, almost nothing. And Alexandre Chemetov was very famous, and his project was fantastic. And he discussed with the city, and he said, well, he won the competition, and he said, I won't do it if I don't have a contract good enough for me to work 10 years and to be paid correctly. And he said, I can't accept to be paid nothing when I do urban planning, and very well when I design a park. So he could have it. And my work was to deal with the ministry to say how we could build this contract It was very important because, in my opinion, if you do it once, afterwards it's possible. That's why I think examples are very important.
Yeah, what I meant is examples from, I separate between Europe and the US and
yeah, but in Lebanon,
because the basic
first of all, you have very good.
Example of Barcelona and Beirut.
Yeah.
What Robert says, it cannot be done.
No,
it cannot be.
Okay. No. Yeah, I will explain Barcelona, but I want to say that I discovered that the urban planners here in Lebanon, they're fantastic. They're very good, very good. And when I invited in Paris 500 people in the room, Jade and Mona, this Mona, because there are two Mona Fawaz, they had a great success, and everybody said it was the best presentation of the whole day, and they were fascinated. They say how Lebanese are good, because they deal with so much difficulties and they dare do it. So I think first of all you have good people, you are very brilliant, and Lebanese are very proactive. I mean, if they see that something works, they can reproduce it. I think this is possible. And why Barcelona? I will explain Barcelona. I'm very fond of Barcelona, and I know this city maybe better than Paris and my city. So Barcelona, the situation was awful. They've had dictatorship for 40 years. And you have to know that Barcelona was the city hated by Franco. And they had very, very bad conditions. Franco created the big Madrid and refused to Barcelona to increase its territory. They are very small. And then they had very bad conditions. And after the dictatorship, they've had democracy with a very, very good mayor. Okay, this is deeper because you need to have a good leader. And what happened is that during the bad period, architects and urban planners designed the city, had many ideas, had the idea of the walkable city, and they were ready. Like you are ready. You are ready. That's my... and at the moment it was possible, they did what we weren't able to do in France. It was impossible because they had this energy. When you are in a catastrophic situation, you have an energy that white cities don't have. I live not far from Nice. For decades, Nice had done nothing because it was such a beautiful city, and Riviera city. At the end, it was terrible for Nice because when you do nothing, everybody does it, do nothing, and the city is a mess. So they had to react. So I think that in the terrible situation, people are more proactive. Of course, in Lebanon, you have to find some leaders, maybe local leaders, to try to make some experiments, to change things. You asked me also if I think that the city center is a projet urbain.
Yeah.
Yes, no and yes. No and yes. No, because it doesn't link. I said that projet urbain links. No, it doesn't link. You have highways that separate the city center from the city, like Birmingham. And also, nobody lives here. Almost nobody. But it's not so bad because they enhance heritage, they design public spaces. It's the only place where you can walk. And it's not all bad. You can't say that it's horrible. It's not horrible. It's not so bad. But it has to be more livable, establishing links with the city, and being habitated. So maybe, but I think that it's not finished. The story is not finished. The city is always changing, and our job is to find opportunities to change step by step. And I tried with Mona. Mona for once tried to help me for the PowerPoint, because when I speak, if it's not perfect, it's not a problem. But when it's written about English, it's horrible. So we tried to explain, articuler projet urbain et planification. It wasn't easy, because in my idea,
what was the translation of projet urbain, Mona?
It's not possible to translate. It's not possible.
Okay.
It's very French, projet urbain. But anyway, I mean, for me, you can't first make the urban planning and then define from the urban planning how the projects will be. This is not, it has never been, it never happened, and now it's impossible. So for me, it's more important to do like New York, and this is interesting for Lebanon, for instance, the way Bloomberg designed the vision for New York. It's much more interesting than a real, comment on dit, plan directeur? Master plan. It's much more interesting. And also, how can you know what's happening, what people are doing, and transform it in the way to go in the direction of your vision? This is possible because Lebanese, even the investor, they're not stupid. If you can deal with them and you say, maybe you will earn more money because it will be nicer, it can work. And what you need also is to make people interested in urban planning and urban design. It's very difficult, even in Europe. It's very difficult because we speak a language that nobody understands. And I'm very surprised when I read the newspaper Le Monde every day, all the 40 pages every day. And then, because I'm interested in everything. So when you read, for instance, the 4, 5, 6 pages of science, it's incredible. You understand everything. You can understand how the new vaccines work. You can understand how you can treat cancer with the new system because they explain it perfectly. And if you read an article about architecture or urban planning, you understand nothing. Why? Since it's easier to understand because it's our way of life.
I hate
and
to interrupt.
why we don't say the thing properly? For instance, I will finish, Mona. Sorry, but this is interesting. For instance, a few years ago, we've had a burning, an incendie, a fire around Marseille, and the city was in danger. But at the same time, people were burning in Portugal, in the highways. And for me, it was evident. It was l'étalement urbain, sprawl. In the two cases, urban sprawl with the land that is very dry and with no possibility for the water to, so on. Anyway, it was my message. And they told me, you can't say that because it's not 100% right. Okay, it's not 100% right, it's 80% right. And if I say that, everybody understands, okay? And we never take this risk. We speak, in a very technical language, and we take precaution, and we have to be very precise. Yeah. Sorry, Mona.
I really hate to interrupt. It's the most horrible session to be moderating. But this is really to give the floor to the audience and give you back the floor to answer any questions that our audience may have. So please, if you'd like to speak, just raise your hands, and there's a traveling mic that Ali will circulate. I can't see very well with this light, so is there anyone? Or are you all speechless?
You know what to do, Mona? If they don't want to ask a question, I'll do it. You give me a number. A number. 4. And you give me a number. Mona, give me a number. Any number. 7. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. Alors, 1, 2, 3. It doesn't work. 4, 6, 7. You have black hair and a beard. No?
The one behind.
Yes. You ask a question. And you will see, you take it at random and we will ask a very good question. You see. Reaction, anything.
She took me.
Ask one question about what we are doing now in urban design. Topic vertical urbanization.
So we are doing a project for vertical limbo sites in Beirut. I took a site in Mar Mkhail on the edge, as limbo edge for the Shar al-Helo station. I was trying to, so my intervention, the start of the intervention was to start to pedestrianize the area. And maybe because of the typology of the ground, to redesign maybe the layers of La Défense, of a promenade on the top as a pedestrian area, and maybe a commercial site on the underground layer, since the underground layer will connect with the parking of the Shar al-Helo. Do you think that could be a good start to maybe to launch?
Well, it's difficult, but I think that it's good to try to give a future to this station that is also in a very interesting place. But did you discuss with the people around? Because this is a new method that we are practicing more and more in France. I mean, and that Alexandre Chemetov does all the time, is to invent the program by speaking with people that are around. What are the ideas? Are they interested in this place? What could be made? Did you do that? Or maybe you can do that now.
The land use and doing an autopsy of the area, 50 to 60% of the area is in limbo, and the residents there.
But there are people living here around, even if they're far, not very far. There are restaurants, there are many places.
Maybe we try to.
The sites, limbo sites in Beirut from a utopian perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. And what we are trying to do, we are trying to what we call retrofit these sites from limbo sites to power hubs, meaning that if we go around and we see what are the high-rises, the towers, or the malls that have been decaying due to the situation and due to the competition, how could these structures be retrofitted since we don't have the infrastructure? You know, the public infrastructure does not work, so we cannot depend on the public sector. What we are trying to do, we are trying to imagine to create enclaves within the city that are self-sufficient around these limbo sites, around these decaying sites, transforming them into, you know, energy production, into the provision of public spaces, etc. So we are just, you know, rethinking, because we are very pessimistic. I am, at least, you know, very pessimistic about, you know, trying to intervene at this, you know, in this particular situation. So
yes, but I think that I'm thinking about Fondation de France, because once in front of the house of my sister-in-law, there was a gas station, and it closed. And then it's closed. So once, and her parking is here. I went there, I found it's very nice. There are people eating, people cooking. What that? And we discussed with the guy, what's that? What's the name? Nation Station. We discussed with a guy, a fantastic guy, who created an NGO to be able to deal with the poor people, to give money, to give food, and so on, and not only food. And it's paid by Fondation de France. This is, in my opinion, and now it's because I saw it 10 months ago. I was here, and now they improved it. It's fantastic. So I think that the city can be made like that, even your site. How can you attract people who say, here, we have a land, it's not used. What can be done? There are people who want to make things, and they invent ideas that you can't have, because this idea of station nation, nobody can have it except this NGO. And it's fantastic. And also, it's very nice for this. It's not boring, because when you go there are people doing things and eating and discussing, and it's fantastic. It wasn't like that. So maybe your idea is very good. I don't say it's not, because I don't know. It can be very good. But I think also that it would be interesting, in your case, to organize a debate with anyone who wants to come, anyone, and you say, those are our ideas. Do you have other ideas? Can we discuss what can be done? And you will see that you will be surprised. It's only, I'm saying that to say that it's the new urban fabric, because it's not only bottom-up, it's not only the know-how people that can imagine things, but sometimes it comes from people that you can't imagine that they have ideas. And it can be interesting. And maybe you can have both. I mean, your idea and those people, and maybe Fondation de France will pay for that. We don't know. So anyway, it's good to try to find a use for this place.
Number 50.
Number 50.
No, it's number 50.
Okay.
Hello. Oh, hi. Hello. Thank you for being here, of course. And I just had a question, since you have written so much about energy, and you are now in the country where energy is, plummeting day by day. We are in a crisis where, my generator guy keeps sending me messages of how long he will give me energy. And you spoke about these energy towers in Madrid. So I just wanted to know a bit more about that project, about how it connected to the actual grid, and if this was a government initiative. Yes, the technological tree. If this was a initiative that was a private initiative and that connected to the private grid.
Initiatives of architects, but the city welcomed it.
Okay.
And that was one of my points, that how can you welcome good initiatives that correspond to your vision.
Okay.
So this team, I forgot the name, I will find it, they're very brilliant, and they make proposals to the city, and in this new development, in addition to the production of energy, it's very nice. I mean, it's beautiful. It's also create shadow, because it's very hot in Madrid. In the summer, you can die. It's like Jordan. And when people are here, it's nice. They produce energy, and they have also the water, remisateur. But it's like a private public system, but not with developers, but with young architects. But I think that, especially in this country, you can have small initiatives to create energy with the buildings, with many facilities. It's possible, and the walkable city is one of the solutions. Walkable city and proximity. How can you work? I mean, you don't want to stay all the time near your house, but if you can find around your house the today users, it's good. And then you can go to the sea, go to Tyr to go. Okay, but if you can have a walkable city and walk, not use the car, it's really like the best thing is not to produce energy, is not to spare energy. Or in Lebanon, for instance, my sister-in-law, she takes the car to go to ABC, and I tell her, I will walk. How you will walk? It's 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Okay, it's not very comfortable because in Ashrafiyeh, how do you say? It's un parcours d'obstacles.
Of course.
I mean, it's made for not walking. I mean, you can die, but if you look at your feet, you can walk, and it's a good exercise because you have to walk. You know, the sidewalk is like that, so it's like making exercises or gym. But people have to walk. It's one of the solutions.
Thank you very much. I think we need to conclude. It's already 8 p.m. So I want to thank you again for a very stimulating presentation, very inspiring talk, and the debate between you and Robert was fantastic. So thank you, Robert, for doing such a great job commenting on Ariela's work. I thank everyone for their attention and invite you to continue over dinner this evening, and tomorrow during the panels and the breaks we'll be able to carry it over. Thanks again and have a good evening.
Thank you.